Hi, my name is Chris Story. This week, for the discussion, I chose to read the first chapter from John Sailant's Black Puritan, Black Republican, The Life and Thought of Lemuel Haynes from 1753 to 1833. Sailant begins with Lemuel's birth, which is a birth of irony. He was born to a black father and a white mother. The white mother gave up the son Lemuel to the family, and she ended up naming him after that house as a curse. Didn't really explain why or how that was a curse, but his first name became Lemuel, which is biblical, and it's a reference to Proverbs 31, which is a story of a child raised well by his mother. There's the irony, to become a king. The name also means belonging to God, which was ironic and prophetic because Lemuel later on becomes a very famous preacher for his time. He's raised in Granville, Massachusetts. He was indentured, not enslaved, and was later adopted by the Rose family. Very generous in raising him, allowed him to become educated, read, write, go to school, be brought up in the church. He was not formally converted, however, until the age of 20 when he had a coming to Jesus moment while observing the northern lights under an apple tree, decided to give his life to God. He was a Calvinist of the New Divinity Light, and he would go on to become the strictest of his orthodoxy. That's self-described. Around the same time as his conversion at age 20, the revolution was starting to pick up. He marched in response to the Boston Massacre. He also marched on Ticonderoga under Ethan Allen. And though his indenture was already up in 1774, he decided to go home back to the Roses and remain there until he was able to later support himself. One of his greatest contributions to abolitionists is we believe that he shared this message, but it was not published until very, very recently, comparatively, titled Liberty Further Extended, or Free Thoughts on the Illegality of Slave Keeping. In this wide-ranging track, he covered a lot of information. He provides a historical approach to the anti-biblical slave trade, the hypocrisy of the American sentiment towards slavery in the face of fighting for freedom, and then the damnation of the Judaic and Muslim practice of slavery. Though never actually a slave, he wrote vociferously about the inhumane treatment of slaves, and he usually got the second hand from the slavers, and also borrowed very heavily from Anthony Benezet's 1771 publication titled Some Historical Account of Guinea. From that account, he described the barbarity of the capture, transfer, and treatment of the enslaved peoples on their way to the Americas. He also built his thoughts on slavery with regards to the Old Testament and the New Testament comparatively. He focused on the apparent approval of slavery in the Old Testament, using a couple of verses, somewhat cherry-picking, therefore held that the Jews were accountable to the current trade in Africa, not solely, but in part. He also held that Muslims of Africa were responsible, and you can find that in their Quran. He was using their scripture. Christianity, he held, should be free of any relationship to slavery, as Christ died for everyone equally, as we were all sinners, and erasing any differences, any true differences between the peoples of the world. He was also quoted saying that the Christians involved with slavery bring ignominy upon our holy religion. It makes the name of Christians sound odious in the ears of the heathen. A theme of old and new were prevalent in Haynes' writings and sermons: the Old and New Testament, the old sin and new forgiveness, the old world and new country. He quoted 2 Corinthians 5:17 quite often: old things are passed away, behold, all things are made new. His hopes, his writings, sermons, and public outcry for slavery to be undone for good in the country claiming the name of Christ helped allow his prophecy to be fulfilled. For his work, he received an honorary degree from Middlebury College in 1804. He was the first black person to receive that honor, so that's amazing. But more importantly, nearly 100 years later, in 1865, with slavery being abolished nationwide, the country was made new. I hope this information was helpful. Thank you and have a good week.